Her daughter-in-law pulled her hair, hard, and called her manipulative. Helen Monroe, retired librarian and widow, didn't scream. Her son stood frozen in the hallway and said, "She's just stressed." By the end of the month, they'd be locked out of the house they thought was theirs. She'd co-signed the deed, but never surrendered the power. And when the sheriff showed up, Helen didn't even have to be there to watch them pack. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The sound of the dishwasher's final cycle beeped in the background, a sharp ping that cut through the thick quiet of the Monroe kitchen. Helen stood at the sink, drying the same plate twice, not because it needed it, but because she needed the motion. Across the island, Brianna scrolled through her phone with one manicured finger, the clack of her acrylics louder than her occasional sighs. "You said you'd unload the dishwasher before work," Helen said carefully, not turning around. "I was running late," Brianna replied, without looking up. "I'm not your maid." Helen set the plate down with more force than she meant to. "It's not about being a maid, it's about contributing to the house. Everyone pulls their weight." "God!" Brianna groaned, pushing her chair back. "You're always keeping score, like we're on some kind of chore leaderboard." "I wouldn't need to if there was any balance," Helen snapped before she could stop herself. Brianna's eyes narrowed. "You know what's exhausting? This whole martyr routine? Like you're the victim of the century because you live in your own house?" Helen's breath caught. "My house," she repeated quietly. Brianna stepped forward. "Oh, here we go. Don't you dare minimize what I've given up to make this work," Helen said, finally turning. "I welcomed you. I fed you. I rearranged my life. And we pay bills too," Brianna cut in. "You act like you're doing us a favor when this is just your weird way of controlling everything." Something in Helen's expression shifted. An old wound cracking open, the salt of betrayal already seeping in. That's when it happened. In a flash, Brianna lunged forward, fingers tangling into Helen's thin gray hair and yanking with all the fury of someone who thought she could get away with it. Helen cried out, sharp and instinctive, stumbling back as her scalp lit up with pain. Her back hit the edge of the counter, the breath knocked from her lungs. The kitchen went suddenly still, the only sound the ticking clock and Helen's shallow gasps. Caleb appeared in the doorway a moment later, barefoot, shirt wrinkled from sleep. "What's going on?" he asked, voice flat, eyes darting between the two women. "She pulled my hair," Helen whispered, one trembling hand rising to her head. Brianna crossed her arms. "She was in my face. I snapped. Big deal." Caleb ran a hand down his face. "She's just stressed, Mom." Helen stared at him. "Just stressed." "Maybe next time," Brianna said coolly, stepping past them. "You'll stay out of my way." She disappeared down the hall, the sound of her steps fading like a final insult. Caleb lingered a second longer, looking at Helen the way someone might look at a knocked-over lamp, not broken enough to care, just inconvenient. "Let's just not blow this up, okay?" Then he left too. Helen was alone again. She lowered herself slowly to the tile floor, knees creaking in protest. Her hand hovered above her head, afraid to touch the sore spot, afraid to confirm that yes, it really happened. The kitchen lights buzzed overhead. The hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than usual. She looked at the floor tile beneath her, the same ones she'd scrubbed clean every Sunday for 27 years, and suddenly they looked like they belonged to someone else. Her breath trembled, not from age, not from the fall, from the realization that no one in this house was on her side. And then, a soft notification ding echoed from her phone on the counter. A new voicemail. She reached for it, hands still shaking. Helen didn't listen to the voicemail that night. She placed the phone face down on the kitchen counter and let the silence settle again, like dust over a room long abandoned. Her scalp throbbed, but what hurt more was the quiet way her own son had looked through her, like she was just one more problem to manage. She slept on top of the covers, fully dressed, door locked. The next morning, coffee steaming between her palms, Helen stared out the kitchen window into the backyard, Brianna's Zen herb garden, complete with Buddha statues from Home Goods and solar lights that blinked like a tacky runway. She remembered when it was her rose bed. Caleb helped her plant it the summer after George died. That was before the job loss, before the late rent calls, before the shrinking bank accounts and the heavy silences over the phone. When Caleb asked if they could stay for a few months, Helen had said yes before he finished the sentence. Of course she did. He was her only child. Family comes home when they need to. She had painted the spare room herself, bought Brianna hypoallergenic pillows and a fancy French press. Tried to keep the house young enough so Brianna wouldn't feel like she was living in a retirement cave. But slowly, her home had stopped feeling like hers. First, the navy curtains disappeared, replaced with gauzy gray ones. Then came the wall decals, Live, Laugh, Love, in the hallway. She found a digital calendar installed on the fridge, syncing everything to Brianna's iCloud. Helen hadn't been asked. She'd just been overridden. She remembered the day Caleb brought it up. They were on the porch, him nervously peeling the label off a beer bottle. "It'll just make probate easier down the road, Mom," he'd said. "If something happens, I don't want us tied up in courts. You've got your will, but title's a whole separate beast." Helen had nodded, uneasy but trusting. He said they'd still defer to her on all decisions, that it was just a legal formality. But she wasn't stupid. She read every word of that deed, even if they didn't know it. She knew exactly what Caleb had signed, and what he hadn't. Her fingers traced the edge of the coffee cup. On page 3, paragraph 6, buried beneath legalese and formatting clutter, there it was. Seller retains exclusive right to execute sale and transfer of property without secondary co-owner consent. She had insisted on keeping it. "I have to protect my assets in case I need to move to a retirement facility," she had told the lawyer with a tight smile. Just a what if. It was the only time she'd hidden something from Caleb. Now, she was glad she had, because looking back, none of this felt like accident or oversight. It felt like erosion, strategic and slow. Brianna hadn't just taken over a bedroom. She'd chipped away at Helen's voice, her agency, her very role in her own life. And Caleb, he had watched it happen with his hands in his pockets. Helen stood, walked to the hallway closet, and pulled down the accordion file box she hadn't touched since last tax season. She sat on the floor, laid out every home-related document, and read them one by one until dusk settled in the corners of the living room. She found herself circling words, highlighting power phrases, rereading lines like scripture. She wasn't just some aging homeowner on the sidelines of her own house. She still had the pen. As she filed the paperwork back into its envelope, Helen froze. There, wedged behind the last folder, was a crumpled sticky note in Caleb's handwriting. "Bree wants to paint the cabinets this weekend. Cool? Not can we? Not do you mind? Just cool?" Helen held the note in her hand for a long moment before feeding it into the paper shredder. The machine hummed to life, chewing it to ribbons. Then she reached for her landline, dialed the only number she hadn't used in months. It rang twice. "Angela Kellerlaw," came the crisp voice. Helen's lips curled slightly. "It's Helen Monroe. I need a real estate lawyer, and I think you're still the best in the business." Caleb stood in the doorway of Helen's study like a man auditioning for the role of peacekeeper, one socked foot tapping, phone in hand. "She didn't mean it like that," he said finally. Helen didn't look up from her crossword. "Didn't mean to grab my hair? Or didn't mean to say I was in her way?" His lips pressed together. "She's under a lot of pressure." Helen marked a word with extra force. Betrayal. 6 letters. "Do you know what the pressure feels like, Caleb?" she said, eyes still down. "It feels like having your scalp yanked like you're a dog." He sighed. "Can we not dramatize this?" "I talked to her. She knows it wasn't okay." Helen turned a page. "Did she apologize?" "She said she regrets the way it went down." "That's not an apology." Caleb looked away, jaw twitching. "I just think we should keep this in the family. Not everyone needs to hear about it." Helen finally looked up. Because it reflects badly? He hesitated. Well, yeah. I mean, family stuff is messy, doesn't need to become gossip. Interesting, Helen murmured. That's what you're worried about. Optics. He opened his mouth, then closed it. She could almost see the discomfort crawling across his skin. Caleb wasn't built for confrontation, not with Brianna, and certainly not with his mother. He lived in that permanent middle ground, Switzerland with a mortgage. He left without another word. Later that afternoon, Helen passed the guest bedroom and paused. The door was ajar. Inside, Brianna's voice rose like a flare, sharp and unfiltered. No, seriously, she plays the sweet old lady card like it's a job. Total manipulator, Brianna was saying, phone on speaker. Caleb's too chicken to call her out, but I swear, she just sits there with that fake polite smile, like a spider, waiting to guilt you. The voice on the other end laughed. Helen moved away before she heard the rest, not out of courtesy, but strategy. She walked quietly back to her room, opened the Notes app on her phone, and pressed record. Monday, 3:47 p.m., she said softly. Overheard Brianna saying I manipulate Caleb with guilt. Tone hostile. Said I sit like a spider. She doesn't know I heard. It became a ritual after that. Small daily entries, not rants, not vengeance, just facts. Time, tone, content, documented. Every time Caleb deflected, every time Brianna made a snide remark behind a smile, every time Helen was told she was sensitive, fragile, or, the one that always stung, not mentally sharp anymore. Truth, captured in her own voice. On Wednesday, she met Angela at a small corner cafe downtown, tucked between a tailor and a vape shop, the kind of place with chipped mugs and reliable silence. Angela looked older but sharper, same no-nonsense posture, same ability to read a document like it was an autopsy report. They sat side by side, a laptop between them, the deed pulled up in high-resolution black and white. Angela tapped the screen. Here's what matters. Paragraph 6, just like you thought. You hold exclusive power of sale. He doesn't have a leg to stand on. Helen let that settle. It didn't feel like victory. Not yet. It felt like a weapon buried in velvet, pulled out quietly and placed on the table. You ready to use it? Angela asked. Helen didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out the cafe window. A young woman was walking by, earbuds in, baby strapped to her chest, moving forward, focused, no one slowing her down. She turned back to Angela. I just want my home back. Angela nodded. Then we'll move carefully, quietly. I'll start the paperwork, draft protective clauses. You say when? Helen sipped her coffee. You'll know. They stood to leave, hugging briefly. As Angela disappeared into the blur of cars and pedestrians, Helen checked her phone. 2 new messages, one from Caleb. Can we talk soon? Don't do anything impulsive. And one from an unknown number, just 4 words. Your house, our future. Helen didn't flinch, but she did press record again. Wednesday, 5:42 p.m., she whispered. Text from unknown number, threat adjacent, message saved. She stepped into the crosswalk, not rushing, but not stopping either. The scrambled eggs were rubbery. Helen had cooked them herself, intentionally, leaving the skillet on too long, just enough to give the brunch that overcooked, passive-aggressive texture. She placed the last plate on the dining table, her movements exact, her smile professionally faint. Yum? Brianna said, poking the eggs like they might squirm. Didn't know we were going for cafeteria chic this morning. Helen smoothed her napkin across her lap. Just trying to keep it simple. Caleb gave a weak smile as he poured orange juice. He had shaved but missed a patch near his neck. His eyes looked grayer than usual, drained, dulled, like a man living at the bottom of a decision he couldn't climb out of. So, Brianna said, sipping her mimosa with the flair of someone who believed she was in a more glamorous life than the one she actually had. Have you been forgetting stuff lately, Helen? Like, basic stuff? Helen blinked. Pardon? Nothing big. Brianna shrugged. You just asked me twice yesterday what day it was. And you left the back door open all night last week. I read somewhere that's how dementia starts. Little gaps. She sipped again. It runs in families, right? Caleb shifted in his seat, glancing at his plate. Bree? What? I'm just saying, early signs are easy to miss, and we should be watching out for you. Helen chuckled. Just a soft, breathy laugh that settled into her chest like a stone. Well, I'm sure I'll start wandering the neighborhood in my nightgown any day now, she said brightly, spearing a piece of burnt toast. I'll make sure to wear the pink one you hate. Brianna grinned, satisfied. Score 1. After brunch, Helen retreated to her bedroom, closed the door, and knelt behind the armchair with the floral slipcover. She opened the package that had arrived from Angela's office, 2 motion-activated recorders, no larger than a lipstick tube. She placed one in the hallway vent near the kitchen, the other in the faux ficus tree in the living room. No more memory games. That evening, she got the call. Still interested? The realtor said. Buyer's solid, all cash, no financing, no inspection, wants it wrapped in 6 weeks. Helen nodded as she listened, fingers moving across her day planner. Angela was already drafting protective clauses, seller rights, transfer buffers. They'd proceed like clockwork. Later, Helen took her mail from the rusted box at the end of the drive. She shuffled through it under the porch light, pizza coupons, a Medicare ad, and 2 credit card letters. One addressed to her, the other, to Brianna Monroe, at Helen's address. She froze. Inside, she slit the envelope carefully, pulling out the letter. Congratulations. Your co-applicant status has been approved for a store line of credit. Helen stared at it. Co-applicant. With her address. No call, no conversation. She placed the letter in a separate file folder marked Fraud 2025, slid it into the bottom drawer of her locked cabinet, and sat on the edge of her bed. She didn't cry. That was long gone. Instead, she Googled motion-triggered door cameras with cloud storage and discrete LED lights. On Tuesday morning, she opened the front door to find a thick manila envelope poking out of the mail slot. Handwritten address. No return label. Her gut tightened. She pulled it open slowly. Inside, a letter addressed to Brianna Monroe and an enclosed loan approval. Home equity line of credit, $78,000, tied to the house, tied to her home. Helen read the first paragraph 3 times, making sure she wasn't hallucinating. Primary collateral, residential property at 1420 East Meridian Lane. Helen's name was nowhere on the application. Her fingers gripped the envelope tighter. This wasn't sloppiness. This wasn't desperation. This was theft, dressed up as entitlement. Down the hall, Brianna's laugh rang out, probably on FaceTime again, gabbing to some friend who'd never scrubbed a baseboard in this house. Helen walked quietly to her study, locked the door, and placed the documents in the same fireproof box that held George's death certificate. Then she picked up her phone and texted Angela, "Found something. We need to accelerate the timeline." A pause. Then Angela's reply blinked in, "Come in tomorrow. Bring everything." Helen stared at the letter one last time, then put it away. She didn't need to reread it. It was already etched into her next move. Helen started coughing on Thursday morning, a low, dry tickle at breakfast. She added a soft rasp to her voice, just enough to sound worn. When Brianna asked if she was sick, Helen gave a vague nod and gestured to her throat like it hurt to speak. And then she stopped speaking altogether. Not out of submission, out of control. Without her voice, the house filled with other sounds. Caleb's half-mumbled job alerts, Brianna's ever-cheerful babe across FaceTime, the staccato click of her boots across the hardwood when she thought no one was listening. Helen became a ghost with a notepad. She scribbled reminders, passed salt wordlessly, replied to questions with shrugs. Her eyes never wavered. Her ears never missed. The change agitated Brianna almost immediately. "It's weird," she muttered to Caleb one night as they folded laundry in the living room. Helen sat nearby, knitting something that didn't need to be finished. "She's being dramatic. What is this, a silent protest?" "She doesn't feel well," Caleb mumbled. "Maybe give it a rest." "You're seriously defending her right now?" Brianna snapped. "I'm just saying, drop it." Helen didn't look up. but she was recording. The little motion-triggered device in the ficus tree blinked once, quiet and patient. That weekend, she began transferring her voicemails to a digital archive. It took time. Helen sat with headphones, clicking each message one by one. Caleb's flat apologies, Brianna's dismissive instructions, even the unknown texts she'd transcribed into audio files with time-stamped narration. She labeled them neatly. April 3rd, hair incident response, April 11th, dementia comment, April 14th, unknown, text threat, April 16th, credit fraud, envelope. Each clip had its place, each word, its weight. The next Monday, while Brianna was at a networking brunch, Helen drove to her bank. The branch manager recognized her. They talked in low voices at the back desk, behind a half wall and a pot of dying orchids. Helen produced her documents one by one. No anger, no panic, just calm authority. "Remove my name from all emergency access points," she said softly. Backup cards, shared lines, linked autopay, anything they could reach. The woman nodded, typing with practiced fingers. On her way home, Helen stopped at a pharmacy and bought 3 bottles of ibuprofen, 2 boxes of tissues, and cough drops she didn't need. She made sure to be seen bringing them in. That night, Brianna found her wiping the counters slowly, a scarf tied around her neck. "This whole mime act is starting to creep me out," she said. "Seriously, what are you even doing?" Helen turned, looked her in the eye, and gave a long, theatrical sniffle. Then she went back to wiping. Brianna's jaw clenched. "You're acting paranoid and petty, like this weird performance? It's not fooling anyone." Helen wrote on a sticky note and held it up. "Sometimes silence says more." She left the note on the counter. Caleb, who'd just walked in from the garage, stared at it, said nothing. The next morning, Helen returned to the fireproof box in her study and added a new document, her updated bank account summary with a bold red solo stamped across the top. She felt the shift. For the first time in 3 years, her money answered only to her. That evening, as she watered the dying violets on the porch, the mailbox creaked open with its usual reluctance. A padded envelope sat inside, bulkier than a letter. Her name in sharp, all-caps black ink. No return address. Helen took it inside, placed it on the dining table, and slit the seal with a steak knife. Inside was a glossy folder labeled Preliminary Closing Package, 1420 East Meridian Lane, from Angela. Her breath caught, not from fear, from acceleration. Attached was a post-it, offer formalized. Next step is yours. Helen turned the final page and found a note paper-clipped to the bottom, handwritten, not Angela's. "If this sells without my sign-off, you'll regret it." It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Caleb's. Helen sat down slowly, pressed record on her phone. April 23rd, threat note received, from Caleb. Logged. She looked out the window. The lights on the Buddha statues were flickering again. The buyer was younger than Helen expected, early 40s maybe, crisp navy suit, polite handshake, drove a gray Tesla that barely made a sound pulling into the Starbucks parking lot. Her name was Vanessa Ridgway, a local investor who liked homes with bones, as she put it. She spoke in direct, efficient terms, never once referring to Helen's house as quaint or retro. "I've seen the inspection history, I'm satisfied. We'll wire within 24 hours of contract acceptance. No contingencies," Vanessa said, sipping a black coffee that smelled like money. Helen nodded, calm. "And you'll need a 3-week close?" 15 business days, Vanessa confirmed, tapping her phone. "That's our sweet spot." No fuss, no games. Helen slid a manila folder across the table. Angela's draft protections, sale terms, identity verifications. Vanessa flipped through them with the speed of someone used to signing away commas for a living. "It's clean," she said. "Just send your lawyer the wire instructions when ready." When Helen left the cafe, she didn't smile, but she did take the long way home, past the old library where she used to work, past rows of book-lined windows now grayed with dust and forgotten community posters. She felt like a chapter was already turning. Back home, she stood in the hallway for a full minute before opening the hall closet. Her hands hovered over the coats and holiday bins. She pulled out 3 empty boxes from the garage and began spring cleaning. To Caleb and Brianna, it looked harmless, seasonal, even helpful. Helen made sure the tape dispenser clicked loudly, that the labels were crooked and vague. Guest bed, linens books, donate winter things. Each night she boxed up another sliver of her life, photo albums, old letters, costume jewelry, George's cufflinks. The good stuff went into the trunk of her car. The decoys stayed in the open, perfectly visible. Angela filed the pre-sale paperwork that Friday. A brief email arrived. All green on the title check. We're moving. Helen cleared her name off every utility account by Monday: electricity, water, trash. She set her end dates with the kind of precision usually reserved for countdowns. Meanwhile, Brianna was planning a backyard party. Helen found the flyer discarded on the dining table: pink flamingos, margarita fonts, spring fling at the Monroe pad. In Comic Sans, no RSVP, no courtesy heads-up, just a loud pastel assertion that the home belonged to her. Helen tucked the flyer into her planner and said nothing. The next day, she walked to the police station under the guise of reporting misplaced mail. She asked a few innocent questions, chatted with the desk sergeant about property lines and decibel levels. Then she filed a quiet complaint. "Hypothetical noise concern," she said with a small smile. "Just so there's a paper trail in case I need to call later." The clerk nodded, used to nosy neighbors and long feuds over lawn chairs. Back at home, Helen packed up her good china, wrapping each piece in old newspaper and sliding them into a bin labeled fall decor. From the kitchen, she heard Brianna on speakerphone again. "Yeah, no, I told Caleb, we need to make that party lit. I don't care if she's sulking in her sewing room. This is our house too." Helen paused, teacup in hand, then set it down with surgical care. That evening, she logged into her utilities account one last time to confirm the disconnections. Electricity, ending May 3rd. Water, ending May 4th. Trash service, canceled. Wi-Fi, already down next week for routine maintenance. Every timer was ticking. She checked her phone. A new message from Angela. "Ridgeway wired 15% into escrow. Legally binding now." Helen stared at the screen, then opened her recorder one more time. April 27th. Buyer transfer confirmed. Party scheduled for May 2nd. Utilities terminate May 3rd. They're celebrating the wrong thing. She hit stop. From the hallway, Caleb's voice drifted in. "Bree, where's the champagne? Helen's got to have some stashed somewhere." Laughter followed. Helen didn't join them. She opened the fridge instead and pulled out a bottle of sparkling water. Glass, chilled, unopened. She poured one flute, raised it in a silent toast, and whispered, "Soon." The lock clicked into place with a satisfying finality. Helen stepped back and tested the new doorknob, sleek, brass, keypad protected, the kind advertised for privacy suites or college dorms. Caleb wouldn't question it. He didn't even knock anymore. Inside her room, things had changed. The kitchenette nook now held a compact microwave, a chrome mini fridge, and a glass jar of lemon drops. She'd found the fridge on clearance at Home Depot, paid in cash. It hummed like a distant lullaby. She moved deliberately now, like a woman drawing borders, not seeking war, just ready to defend. The next morning, she posted a note on the shared bathroom door. "Use other restroom. Guest only." Brianna saw it first. "Excuse me?" she said aloud, holding the paper like it was soaked in vinegar. "This your idea of passive-aggressive hospitality?" Helen sipped her tea in silence. Caleb joined her in the kitchen later that afternoon, rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to warm up the courage. "This is getting hostile," he said. Helen placed her mug down, folded her hands neatly. "No, Caleb. Hostile was watching someone yank my hair while you watched from the doorway. This," she gestured gently to the locked hallway, "is me giving back the energy I've received." He didn't reply. She let the silence rest between them, thick and instructional. That evening, Helen sat at her desk and opened an email from Angela. Subject line: "Final closing docs. Sign and return today." She clicked through the pages slowly, confirming every clause. No inspection holdbacks, no funding delays, escrow deposit already wired. Helen typed her e-signature into the final line. Then she sat back, heart slow and steady. Angela's follow-up came minutes later. It's done. Full transfer funds ready for May 3rd. Backup certified by title company. We're irreversible now. Helen exhaled. She marked the date in her planner with a red star. She was still holding the pen. 3 days later, a stack of new mail landed at the door. Helen sorted through it calmly, the way one handles minor chores in a burning house. Junk flyers, a bank statement, 2 medical mailers. Then one envelope stopped her cold. It was addressed to Caleb Monroe, but sent to her address. From a funeral insurance provider. Her blood stilled. She opened it with the letter opener George had given her in 1984, gold-plated, engraved. Inside was a policy renewal confirmation. Beneficiary, Caleb Monroe. Insured, Helen Monroe. Monthly draft, active. Policy ID, one she didn't recognize. She flipped the page and reread the fine print, pulse now climbing. It had been signed electronically, time-stamped, authorized. She hadn't seen this paperwork, hadn't approved this beneficiary change. She walked to her desk, pulled out her document binder, and cross-checked her original burial policy. Different policy ID, different terms. This was a second one, opened without her knowledge. Helen's hands trembled, not from fear, from insult, a quiet institutional kind of betrayal, as if Caleb hadn't just stolen access, he had planned for her absence, budgeted her death. She scanned the letter and saved a PDF copy to her external drive. Then she opened a new voice memo. April 30th, unauthorized funeral insurance policy discovered. Beneficiary, Caleb Monroe. Fraud suspected, evidence saved. She placed the original letter into a red folder labeled Final Strike, locked it into her fireproof safe, and walked to the bathroom mirror. She stared at her own reflection for a full 30 seconds. Gray hair, soft lines, eyes still sharp. They didn't know who they were living with. They thought they'd worn her down. But they hadn't realized she'd been preparing to disappear by design. From behind the locked door, she heard Caleb shout, "Bree, where's the guest bathroom key?" Helen smiled. The condo smelled like lemon oil and new beginnings. Helen stepped inside and closed the door softly behind her. No welcome mat yet, no photos on the walls, just clean lines, neutral light, and silence that belonged solely to her. 6 months, paid in full. Utilities already active, internet scheduled. No one else knew the address, not even Angela, at Helen's request. She placed the keys on the marbled entry table and walked the perimeter. The bedroom overlooked a narrow courtyard where hummingbirds darted between fuchsia blooms. The kitchen had quartz counters, smooth to the touch. In the closet, the beginnings of her new life. 3 bags, neatly arranged. She had started bringing things over 2 weeks ago, slowly, during midday grocery runs or invented errands. The good jewelry came first, then George's medals, her mother's porcelain owl collection, and her birth certificate. Each trip, a quiet subtraction from her former life. On today's run, she had brought the most important files, power of attorney records, banking passwords, the deed copy, and her funeral plan, the real one. She locked them into the safe beneath the bed. The new bed. Hers, and only hers. Back at the house, she made sure the decoys stayed visible. Folders labeled will that held expired tax coupons, flash drives filled with sample knitting patterns, her desktop browser open to a mock search, best dementia care facilities near me, let them dig. She opened the browser's history next, deleting everything real, escrow logins, Angela's private portal, email chains with Ridgway's team. Gone. From her closet, she pulled 2 bags, one to donate, the other to destroy. Old scarves, brittle photo frames, receipts she no longer needed. She loaded them into the trunk and dropped the donation bag at a church thrift shop downtown. Then she drove to a self-serve paper-shredding kiosk and fed the second bag to its steel maw. It sounded like teeth grinding down regret. That afternoon, she sat at her new condo's kitchen counter and wrote a letter, not to Caleb, not to Brianna, but to someone she'd nearly abandoned. It began, "Dear Helen, age 42. She wrote about her fear of being alone after George died, about the compromises that crept in slowly, first the guest room, then the pantry, then the master bathroom. She wrote about watching her own reflection fade until only politeness remained. She wrote about the exact moment she stopped waiting to be saved. At the end, she signed her name cleanly, confidently. Then, she folded the letter and placed it in the nightstand drawer beside the lemon-scented lotion. She wasn't running. She was arriving. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the condo's western wall, she booked a massage online. It was indulgent, unnecessary, and completely hers. Confirmation pinged into her inbox. Saturday, 3:30 p.m. First time in years she'd scheduled something without checking anyone else's calendar. She stared at the screen and smiled. Then her phone buzzed. A new voicemail. From the house landline. Her thumb hovered over the play button. She tapped it. Brianna's voice came through, low and unfamiliar, more tired than sharp. "Hey, I don't know where you are, but we found a package slip with your name on it, from somewhere on Halpern Street. You moving something? Caleb's asking questions." There was a pause. The next part sounded like a whisper not meant to be heard. "I think she's leaving." Click. Helen stared out the window. The hummingbird had returned, hovering in place like a question mark. She didn't move, didn't blink, but she pressed record on her voice memo app. May 1st. First sign they're sensing departure. Timeline remains intact. She closed the blinds. Tomorrow was May 2nd. Party day. The last celebration they'd throw in her house. The backyard was strung with fairy lights and false confidence. Plastic flamingos stood crooked in the mulch like drunk sentinels. A foldable bar cart leaned against the fence, stocked with cheap Prosecco and even cheaper tequila. Helen watched from the kitchen window as Brianna placed the last bowl of queso on the patio table, with the flair of someone hosting a reality show elimination dinner. She wore wedges too tall for grass and a sundress with lemons printed across the chest. Loud, sugary, sour underneath. Guests trickled in around 2. Brianna greeted them with the voice she reserved for coworkers she hated. Too high, too warm. "Welcome to our little oasis," she beamed. "We're finally upgrading the space, going full outdoor chic." Helen stepped outside 10 minutes later, linen blouse crisp, sunglasses on, holding a tray of lemon bars like an apology she didn't mean. "Watch the third one from the left," she told a neighbor, nodding at the deck stairs. "That board's been loose since '98. Brianna blinked, startled. "Helen, you didn't have to." "I wanted to." Helen smiled sweetly. "You know, I like things to be tidy." She made the rounds slowly. A familiar rhythm, hostess without the title. People responded to her like they always had. Gentle smiles, polite nods, a few too interested glances from the neighbors who'd heard whispers through the hedges. To each one, she leaned in and said softly, "Just so you hear it from me, I'll be moving soon. Downsize, fresh air." The reactions varied, some surprised, some understanding. Brianna didn't hear any of it. She was too busy telling someone from Caleb's old job about their plan to flip the space eventually, that they were finally unlocking the equity. It was the word unlocking that made Helen pause. She drifted closer, head tilted, drink in hand. "So exciting," the woman said. "Congrats again on that equity pull. Those rates are nuts right now." Helen smiled politely. "Oh, what pull was that?" The guest blinked. "Oh, Bree mentioned it, home equity loan or something. Said it went through lightning fast. Impressive, really." Helen said, setting down her glass. "First I've heard of it." She didn't look at Brianna, who had turned pale but was still smiling, too late to unspin it. "Oh," Brianna said, trying to laugh. "She's just being modest. It's all in her name technically, but we're a team. You know how it is." Helen nodded slowly. "Of course. Just a small team. Very efficient." She stepped away before the silence thickened. Later, as the sun began to dip, she offered to take a photo, "Just the 3 of us for old time's sake." Caleb stood between them, arms awkward at his sides. Brianna leaned in too far, drink still in hand. Helen clicked the shutter twice, then checked the screen. Everything looked fine. Normal, even. Which made it perfect. She sent the photo to herself, filed it under Final Home Image, and smiled. As the crowd thinned, Helen began cleaning up. She did it quietly, deliberately, never once complaining. When someone offered to help, she waved them off with practiced grace. At 7:38 p.m., the music finally died. The Bluetooth speaker had glitched. Wi-Fi was out again. "Maintenance," Helen offered. Brianna rolled her eyes. "Of course." As Helen tossed the final solo cup into the trash, she looked up and saw Caleb sitting alone at the edge of the garden. He was staring into his phone, expression unreadable. She walked past him without a word. Inside, her phone buzzed. "Angela. You're not going to believe what we found. I'll show you in person. Tomorrow morning?" Helen replied with one word. "Ready." The pen clicked once, twice, then rested between Helen's fingers. She sat at the long walnut table in the title company's conference room, across from Vanessa Ridgway, who looked as poised as ever in a charcoal sheath dress and silver flats. Angela was on her left, reading glasses perched low on her nose, flipping calmly through the closing documents like she'd done it 1,000 times, which she had. Sunlight streamed through the window, warming the tops of Helen's hands. Her veins looked bluer today, her skin thinner, but she felt stronger than she had in years. "All set," Angela said quietly, turning the final page. "Deed transfer. Escrow confirmed. Funds are cleared." Helen signed her name in deliberate cursive, the last signature she would ever place on a document tied to that house. Vanessa nodded once, businesslike. "Our team will be on site Monday morning. Locksmith's already scheduled. We'll be discreet. I'm assuming they're still unaware?" Helen smiled faintly. "They think they're on vacation from accountability." "Got it," Vanessa said. "We'll handle it." Angela gathered the documents, slid them into a branded folder, and handed it to Helen. "This is your clean break." Helen accepted it with both hands. No keys, no backup plans, no reversals. She stood. Her knees didn't ache today. Outside, the Indianapolis morning was crisp, clouds hanging like held breath above the buildings. Helen walked 2 blocks to a small blue USPS box nestled beside a used bookstore. She pulled a stamped envelope from her purse, the letter she'd written at her condo. Not to Caleb, not to Brianna, but to herself. She had addressed it to a P.O. box she'd opened under her maiden name. Not for privacy, for ceremony. She slid the letter into the slot. Let the past find its own way forward. The walk back to her car was light. Her heels clicked neatly against the pavement like punctuation marks, each step saying, "Done. Done, done." She stopped by a local bakery, bought a single lavender scone, and ate it in the front seat without guilt. It crumbled just a little. She let it. Back at the condo, the hummingbird was there again, wings a blur of precision. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and dropped her bag gently on the couch. No shoes kicked off in the hallway, no voice yelling from a back room, no tension radiating from the walls. She opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of sparkling water, and twisted the cap. The sound hissed like satisfaction. She poured it into a glass flute and carried it to the balcony. The hum of distant traffic softened against the wind chimes 2 floors up. She took a sip. It was cold, citrusy, and clean. Her phone buzzed. "Angela. Funds just landed. You're officially cashed out. Deed is theirs as of 10:42 a.m. Helen didn't reply. Instead, she walked back inside, set the empty glass in the sink, and opened the drawer beside her bed. Inside, a small blue thumb drive. She plugged it into her laptop and double-checked the folders. Voice memos, screenshots, deed copy, insurance fraud, folder, equity pull documents, all time-stamped, all cataloged. Nothing dramatic, just facts with teeth. She slid the drive into a padded envelope, addressed it to her attorney's personal office. It wasn't for today. It was a contingency. Because Helen knew something about people like Caleb and Brianna, They didn't just take the house. They came back for the dust. The knock came at 8:03 a.m. It was firm. Me. Azured, official. Caleb, in sweatpants and a faded IU t-shirt, was halfway through a bowl of cereal. Brianna was still in her robe, scrolling through home decor blogs with one eye and sipping iced coffee through a metal straw with the other. He opened the front door expecting a package. Instead, he found 3 people. A man in a navy blazer holding a clipboard, a uniformed Marion County Sheriff's deputy, and a locksmith rolling a red toolbox. "Mr. Monroe?" the man with the clipboard asked. Yeah? "I'm Kevin Darnell, buyer's agent on behalf of Ridgeway Properties. We're here with the recorded deed and transfer documents. You'll need to vacate the premises today." Caleb blinked. "What the hell are you talking about?" The sheriff stepped forward. "The home is no longer titled in your family's name. Transfer was completed May 3rd, 10:42 a.m. All proper procedures have been followed. If you'd like to contest the eviction, you may do so through civil court. But as of now, you no longer reside here." Behind him, Brianna appeared in the doorway, her mouth slightly open. "What is this? Some scam?" she snapped. "It's not a scam," Kevin replied, flipping to the second page. "This is a certified record of deed transfer. The owner of record is Ridgeway Properties, LLC. Caleb stepped back into the house like the floor had shifted under him. No, there's no way. Helen wouldn't sell this house without talking to us." "She didn't need to," Kevin said. "She held sole power of sale. Your names were honorary, not binding." Brianna lunged forward. "You're lying." "I'm not," Kevin said, handing over a manila envelope. "This includes sale confirmation, transfer of ownership, recorded power of sale clause, and fraud logs compiled by the previous owner." "Fraud logs," Caleb echoed. Kevin nodded. "Including credit misuse, co-signed accounts without consent, and," he flipped one more page, "unauthorized insurance documents. All of it has been notarized and filed." The locksmith stepped past them politely. "Excuse me, just need to change out these cylinders." Brianna stared at him, then turned back to the sheriff. "She tricked us." The sheriff didn't flinch. "No, ma'am, she followed the law. You just never read the fine print." A moving crew arrived 15 minutes later, 2 guys in navy jumpsuits and matching baseball caps. They worked fast, methodical, under direct orders. Caleb paced the living room while trying Helen's number for the 3rd time, straight to voicemail. "Mom, please call me," he said. "What is going on?" No response. Brianna stood stiffly in the doorway, mascara smudging beneath her eyes. She planned this, all of it, the cameras, the weird silence, the recorders. She was baiting us. Caleb opened his mouth but said nothing. Kevin turned back from the hallway. "Oh, and one more thing. Sheriff, you flagged something?" The deputy nodded and opened a worn folder. "Yes. During the background check, a report came up tied to this address, connected to Ms. Brianna Monroe, prior eviction, misdemeanor property damage from 3 years ago in Fishers, neighbor filed after an altercation during another move-out." Brianna's mouth opened, closed. That was sealed. "Not from us," the sheriff said calmly. Behind him, the moving crew wheeled out the first box. "You knew," Caleb whispered. "She knew." Brianna's voice broke. Of course she knew. From the end of the driveway, a black car idled. Angela stepped out. She didn't speak, just handed Caleb a single sheet of paper. On it, Helen's final signed exit date, her escrow authorization, and one typed sentence: "This house was never yours to ruin." Angela turned and got back in the car. Caleb stared down at the page. "She played us." "No," Brianna spat. "She destroyed us." Inside, movers carefully disassembled the living room TV. The wall behind it bore faint outlines of where Helen's old cross-stitch sampler once hung. The locksmith finished his final turn of the wrench. Click. Locks changed. From her condo balcony, Helen didn't need binoculars. The clarity of distance was its own kind of vision. The Ridgeway security feed Angela had temporarily granted her access to played in silent loops on her iPad. One clip from the morning showed the locksmith locking the final deadbolt. Another, from an hour later, showed Caleb sitting on the stoop beside a box labeled photos. His head was down. He never reached for his phone. Helen hit pause. She didn't need to see the rest. The house was gone, but in some strange way, it was hers again. Not to live in, but to let go of. Her phone buzzed with the angry persistence of someone refusing to believe they'd been cut off from the source. 6 missed messages. Brianna Monroe. The preview read, "You heartless witch, you think this is over?" Helen blocked the number with a single press. 2 minutes later, Caleb's name appeared. "Please, can we talk?" Then, "I need you to explain how you could do this to your own son." Then, nothing. She stared at the final voicemail he left. 46 seconds. She tapped play. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I didn't see it coming. I really didn't. I thought we were—" Silence. A long, empty pause. Then, "Guess I was wrong." Click. Helen deleted it. That afternoon, she logged into her online banking and transferred $10,000 to a local women's shelter she had volunteered with during her early retirement years. In the memo line, she typed, "For quiet exits." She didn't wait for a thank you. That wasn't the point. At 6:45 p.m., she walked the few blocks to a cozy cafe that hosted weekly open mics. Tonight's theme? New ground. The room smelled of coffee and projection. A half-circle of chairs faced a tiny wooden platform draped in twinkle lights. There were college students with too tight jeans, retirees with trembling pages, and people like her, somewhere between invisible and reawakening. When her name was called, she stepped forward calmly. No introduction. Just paper in hand, voice steady. "I buried myself in compromise so slowly, it felt like aging," she began. A pause. "I let people live in my house like I owed them air. I watered their presence until my roots dried." She looked up. "But now I sleep alone, on purpose, and my name belongs to me again." No applause. Just breathe. At the end, a small clap from the back. Then another. It grew. Not loud, but enough. As she stepped off stage, a woman with a knit hat and no eyebrows stopped her by the tea table. "That felt personal," the woman said. "It was," Helen replied. They didn't exchange names, just smiles. Later that night, back in the condo, Helen placed the folded poem beside her bed, next to the letter to her 42-year-old self, next to the receipt from the locksmith. She wasn't hoarding closure, she was keeping record, just in case she ever doubted how far she'd come. She poured a small glass of white wine and watched the hummingbird return one last time before the sky faded entirely. The new phone number came with a clean SIM, a wiped contact list, and a promise Helen made to herself: no more answering to ghosts. The process was shockingly simple, just 30 minutes at the Verizon store, a polite clerk who never asked why a woman in her late 60s wanted to disappear from her digital history. She left with a new number, new voicemail, and a quiet thrill buzzing beneath her ribs. Next, the locks. Not just the condo door, though she upgraded that too, to a keypad model with a one-touch deadbolt, but also the mailbox, the storage locker, and the drawer where she kept her contingency flash drive. Even her laptop now had a biometric fingerprint sensor. The world hadn't made her paranoid. It had made her precise. Each change felt like brushing dust off her own skin. In the mornings, she now brewed her coffee without checking for footsteps in the hallway. No slammed doors, no voices echoing through vents, just jazz on low volume and the gentle sound of her knees cracking like a pair of aging sparrows. The condo began to feel like hers in ways the house never truly did. It didn't carry George's memory or Caleb's adolescence or the bitterness Brianna trailed like perfume. It was blank, neutral, chosen. And with that neutrality came peace. Her lower back, once tight and aching every morning, began to ease. The tension between her shoulder blades, where years of holding her tongue had settled, started to dissolve. She noticed she wasn't grinding her teeth anymore. She slept, full and uninterrupted, through the night. One evening, coming in from a walk, she met Marisol, 28, just moved in down the hall, working nights at the hospital. They chatted in the elevator. The next day, Marisol knocked to borrow a box cutter. A week later, another young tenant joined them for coffee. By the end of the month, Thursdays became porch tea nights. Helen would make scones or slice fruit while the women talked about breakups, bad bosses, and the loneliness of new leases. They listened when Helen spoke, and not because she demanded it, because she never spoke unless it mattered. They asked if she'd ever been married. She nodded. Asked about kids. She just smiled. Not everything had to be shared to be real. That Friday, Angela appeared at her door holding a bottle of wine and a grin that cracked through the years they hadn't seen each other outside of legalese. "You didn't tell me you had a hummingbird," she said, nodding at the balcony. "He showed up the day I moved in," Helen replied. "I took it as a good omen." They sat at the kitchen counter with glasses of cold white and a charcuterie board Helen had learned to assemble from YouTube. The laughter came easily. Real laughter, not the forced kind that had once followed forced politeness. Angela clinked her glass to Helen's. "To locking doors on the past. To never letting them find the spare key," Helen said. Later, after Angela left, Helen sat on the edge of her bed, still holding her wineglass by the stem, and let the quiet envelope her like a blanket she no longer had to share. She opened her laptop, checked her email. All was quiet. She deleted Caleb's old contact info, deleted the voicemail backup. All of it gone. No forwarding address, no trace. She stood to close the blinds and paused. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. No name, no location, just a ripple in the silence she'd so carefully cultivated. Helen stared at it, not afraid, but alert. She let it ring. Let it stop. A voicemail arrived. She didn't play it. Instead, she powered the phone off, set it face down, and went to the kitchen for more wine. The envelope arrived with no return address, but Helen knew the handwriting before she even picked it up. Caleb had always pressed too hard with a pen, like he thought emotion could be carved into paper. The loop on the H in Helen Monroe was the same from his 5th-grade birthday cards, only now it was crooked, hesitant. She stood in the entryway holding it for a long time, not angry, not curious, just still. The envelope was thick, heavy with pages, the kind of weight that tried to prove something. She ran her thumb along the flap, then placed it, unopened, in the drawer beneath her stationery. Next to the poem, the locksmith's receipt, the letter to her younger self, she pulled out a single blank card, cream paper, no lines. She wrote slowly, "You saved yourself." That was enough. She folded the note, pressed it flat, and slid it beside Caleb's letter, then closed the drawer. She didn't need to read his words to know they were stitched with apologies too late to use. Sentences bent to look like regret. Promises made to no one in particular. She didn't need closure. She had distance. The next morning, she baked. A full chocolate layer cake, dense, rich, imperfect. The frosting clung to the sides in thick swirls. She wrapped it in foil and placed it gently into the back seat of her car, along with a small carton of strawberries and a stack of real plates. The shelter was just 10 minutes away. Inside, it smelled of soap and coffee and lived-in hope. The woman at the front desk, Annika, who recognized her from her old volunteer days, beamed when she saw her. "I knew that donation was from you," Annika said, her voice a mix of welcome and understanding. "That line, 'for quiet exits'? That was yours." Helen smiled. "I brought cake." They set it on a folding table in the community kitchen, where 2 women were already braiding each other's hair. A third flipped pancakes in silence. A fourth sorted through donated scarves like they were silk treasures. Helen stayed, poured coffee, passed out plates. She didn't ask questions, didn't offer advice, but when someone said, "My ex used to scream at the door until I pretended I was dead asleep," Helen just nodded. Someone else said, "I left with $18 and a pair of shoes that didn't match," and Helen offered another slice of cake without a word. No speeches, no confessions, just shared breath and unspoken recognition. For 2 hours, the kitchen felt like a second skin, one that didn't itch, didn't bruise, just stretched to make room. One woman, maybe 25, with a deep scar just beneath her collarbone, laughed so hard at a story about a neighbor's parrot that she nearly choked on her coffee. It was the kind of laughter Helen remembered from before George died, the kind you didn't plan. As the sun slanted low through the kitchen windows, Helen helped rinse dishes. No one asked who she was. They just let her be. That night, back at the condo, she lit a lavender candle and sat down to journal. She wrote about the women, about the frosting that melted a little on one side, about Annika's warmth, the way one girl had whispered, "Thanks, Miss Helen," like they'd known each other for years. She didn't write about Caleb, or Brianna, or the letter still sealed in the drawer. When she closed the notebook, she noticed something odd. The hummingbird feeder she'd set on the balcony last week. It was empty, completely drained. She hadn't even seen him come and go. The tea steamed in Helen's hands, chamomile with a sliver of honey. No sugar, no reason to sweeten something already simple. She sat on the balcony wrapped in a woven shawl, legs crossed at the ankle, hair looser than it had been in years. She hadn't realized how long it had grown until the wind lifted a strand across her cheek. She left it there, the condo's quiet pressed against her ribs like something sacred. Inside, a loaf of banana bread cooled on a rack. Her planner sat open to a week with nothing scheduled. The windows were clean, open, breathing with her. Above the railing, a small brown bird darted in and out of a corner eave. A nest was forming, just twigs and instinct, one strand at a time. Helen sipped her tea and watched the bird work, its body a blur of purpose. No permission sought, no need to ask for space. Her phone buzzed softly against the arm of the chair. A text. Angela. The shelter wants to name a fund after you. Something?